You're not gonna like this video, or maybe you will. Let's see. My channel is named JesterBell for a reason. I'm a massive fan of Harley Quinn. That is, the way I think that she's supposed to be. She's a character who's gone through a lot of changes and inconsistencies in recent years, and has not been proving to be as financially as popular as DC thought. And that's probably because a lot of people just perceive her as a shallow character, which I think is a shame because Harley used to be a very well-written character. But that changed. And there's a lot of reasons for why that happened, which I've already talked about on this channel, but there's one major reason in particular I haven't touched on yet, and I feel a lot of people don't who agree with me because they're afraid of controversy. The reason I'm talking about is Harley's relationship with the Joker, which is very well known to be a fictional abusive relationship. One that DC has done its very best to eradicate from media in recent years. But that's just the thing. They shouldn't have. I know you're shocked and dismayed at me right now, but before you click off, let me explain to you what the Harley Quinn character meant to me. I found Harley through a magazine cover that described her as the Joker's girlfriend, and that immediately grabbed me because it sounded like such a wild and crazy concept. What kind of person would love the Joker? What would that mean for her? What would that mean for the story? That led me to Batman the Animated Series. One of the first scenes I ever saw with Harley was this.
Gee, green. My favorite color.
And I thought fantasizing about an evil killer clown was wild and brilliant. I could tell Harley was a different yet special character already, but I hadn't yet been introduced to the darker elements about her. That is until I saw the scene from her origin episode Mad Love where she gets pushed out of a window. And I was completely shocked by this. I was not used to them putting this kind of dark material in a kid's show, but I kept watching for the context, and I'm very glad that I did. Because Harley did not have a story that was just violent for the sake of violent. She had a story that was a great cautionary tale and exploration of abusive dynamics. On the outside, she had a very comedic and bipolar personality that served for some of the best comic relief in the series. But throughout many episodes, you could see the implications that beyond that silly jovial mask, there was a very disturbed human being. Sometimes you can see her silly-sounding accent drop to a normal-sounding voice, showing the human behind her. Harley Quinn was just a mask. She'd definitely annoy Batman and threaten other characters, but her own episodes would reveal her insecurity and her desperation for the Joker and how his belittlement would affect her. Harley shows a deep struggle that a lot of people have, which is simply desperately seeking approval from the wrong people. The writers of the show built this up to show the inevitable end of that. They made sure that the violence was earned and served as a major warning. But as tender as that story is, the most important part, and the part that stuck with me the most, was this. Harley didn't get over the Joker. I always loved the haunting music at the beginning of Mad Love and how that soft theme plays near the ending when you finally hear some sanity come back to Harley, represented by her thinking in her regular voice. Then when she sees the slightest kind gesture from the Joker again, her Harley Quinn voice comes back, showing her slip back into her obsessiveness. This obviously represents how abuse is a cycle. It can be in relationships, friendships, businesses. It's an insanely relatable thing, but the idea of someone not getting over their abuser really hit me. Most female characters in mainstream media need to fit the mold of being strong and independent and tough. They always overcome in the end. I certainly enjoy my fair share of those characters. Mulan is my favorite Disney movie for a reason, but Harley Quinn was introducing me to something I wasn't used to. A female character allowed to be vulnerable. Harley's continuous struggle with self-esteem and dependency made me relate to the character far more than any of the tough girl boss characters that I was used to being offered. Beyond that, I think that the fact that we expect all stories dealing with this kind of subject matter to have a happy ending makes us not take it as seriously. Some of the most effective storytelling is the kind that allows you to see the bad ending, to confront you with ideas. In this case being the idea not everyone is strong and independent, not everyone gets over their flaws or even want to get over their flaws, to see the real danger of someone not changing. That's what haunted me about Harley's story and why it stuck with me in ways that it otherwise wouldn't have. But while the abusive element is something that really resonated with me, I want to also highlight it isn't the only aspect to this relationship. It's a very important aspect, but it's not the entire thing. A lot of people forget or perhaps don't even know that a lot of Joker and Harley's stories just feature them as a crazy pair of villains who fight Batman. The abuse might be a subtextual thing, or it might not be there at all. And you might be asking, how can I enjoy any other part of this Joker and Harley relationship if I identify with the tragedy so much? Well, you can get more than one thing out of a character or characters. I can think that the Joker is the most reprehensible villain in all all of comics. I can also find him pretty darn hilarious. Mark Hamill and Arlene Sorkin from the original Batman the Animated Series had a ton of chemistry together, and I think that's what really made the relationship work. For me, it's fun as a Batman fan to see a pair of villains with the same sick sense of humor challenge him so much. It's fun to see them bicker and see Harley be able to put Joker in his place at multiple points and make him feel jealous, even though he'd like to think he is above her. Harley brings out a different side to the Joker that you really don't get anywhere else. He's had plenty of other sidekicks in the past, but none of them really fit with him. Harley's the only one that has. Once again, you can get all this while still getting the main theme that this is a toxic relationship. And it's actually important to the toxic relationship narrative that we show quote-unquote positive moments between these two. The camaraderie between them explains why Harley is so addicted to this relationship, hoping that she'll get just the good moments. That's the way it was, and no one had a problem with it, that is, until Harley became mainstream in 2016. You cannot have a mainstream female character who can't be perceived as a role model. The Suicide Squad 2016 movie came out, and it was too fearful to portray Joker and Harley's relationship as it traditionally is, so it tried something else, a Bonnie and Clyde type relationship, but they didn't exactly remove all of the abusive elements out of it, which probably gave them the absolute worst mainstream representation they could have possibly gotten. After this, these two together became super controversial. People thought that they were trying to romanticize abuse rather than be a cautionary tale against it. I remember all of the articles coming out about Harley had to leave to be a good example to her newfound fan base, that it would somehow make her a better, more dimensional, more deeper character because of it. And so it was. Harley was very changed after that. And you might be asking, what's my problem with that? Well, retconning a character away from everything they were meant to be is one thing, but for me, my problem is not that you can't tell a very emotionally compelling story of someone finally overcoming abuse. It's with Harley, what do you do after that? It's not that her only character trait was being in love with the Joker, but it was the core trait that gave her depth and her motivation. Even her motivation for being Harley Quinn was based on her wanting to be with the Joker. What's happened to her after that? Well, in comic books, Harley has lost her vice and motivation. She's pretty much just been bounced from one thing to the next, whether it's bouncing around different personalities or different stories that really don't stick. She's been a YouTube star for all of 2 issues. She went through an arc where she was really worried about her mother dying of cancer all of a sudden that was completely forgotten afterwards. She's tried to be a hero, which really hasn't worked out because she's still kind of a terrible person. And none of these versions of Harley that they've bounced around really have any depth or dimension to them at all. They're incredibly, incredibly shallow. Can you name one comic book story arc featuring Harley post-Joker that gained a lot of notoriety? I can name 2, Harleen and Batman White Knight, 2 alternate universes that were there to explore the original version of the character and that weren't afraid to get into the darker elements. But what about the movies? How has Harley fared there? Well, I think even worse, because the movies were never willing to even explore Harley's relationship with Joker in the first place. Not in the first movie, and then they just make them break up off screen. There's no meaning in the movies to Harley breaking up with Joker because they never developed or built it up in the first place. So Harley just all of a sudden jumps to this shallow character that she's become in comics. And while maybe some people enjoy Harley for just her wacky vibe and aesthetic, it really isn't enough to get most people invested. The last piece of Harley media to cover is the Max Harley Quinn show. Now this is an interesting case because this show tries a lot of things. On the one hand, I appreciate it because it actually tries to develop Harley's breakup with Joker as a very gradual thing. On the other hand, they pretty much change Harley into a completely different character from the get-go anyway to try to make this story even work. But despite all of the effort they put into it, I don't even think it works in the end. It seems to have the same pattern, to me at least, as the comics and movies have. You hit the ground running with a story of Harley overcoming her abuser, but after that she really doesn't have anywhere to go. She tried to take over Gotham once, but they kind of dropped that plot line, and now they have her obsessing over Poison Ivy, but then they jumped to make her a part of the Bat family, which doesn't even fit with her relationship with Poison Ivy, who's still a villain. And if you don't believe me when I say I think they've run out of ideas in that show, well, the showrunners just left, in part, they said, because they had run out of ideas for Harley. Once again, the same pattern seems to exist with Harley Quinn, where they change her so much to try to give her a new status quo, but that status quo really doesn't work. And guys, I have no problem if Harley gets over Joker as the end of her story, but that's just it. It is the resolution of her story, the resolution to her big conflict and her entire reason for being Harley Quinn. She doesn't really have much place to go afterwards. But while I have a lot of problems with how Harley is being portrayed these days, here's my biggest problem. I can't relate to her anymore, because the tragedy and struggle of her character is gone. She's supposed to be a character that still represents abuse victims, but I don't know how she can do that when she's been so far removed from that conflict for so many years. And some media, like the movies, is too afraid to even explore it in the first place. this. And I want to say I perfectly understand why the changes were made. I think that people in general have become a lot more aware and sensitive to topics like abuse. And while that's a good thing, it isn't a good thing if it means that we're limiting the kinds of stories we can tell. Not to mention, there's a lot of hypocrisies to these changes with Harley. If they wanted Harley to be a better role model, then why did they go ahead and make all of her content hard R-rated after the fact? In a lot of ways, she's a more crass and more violent character than she was before. There's also the fact that I've touched on that Harley is supposed to be completely divorced from Joker, yet her name and motif were things that were made specifically to be tied to him. So she's kind of a walking oxymoron. And then there's also the Harley and Ivy relationship, which has been pushed really hard recently. But Ivy in the comics is a toxic, unstable murderer who is actually very toxic to Harley in and of herself, even though Harley has been recently portrayed as just as obsessed with her as she was with the Joker. The only difference is the comic books won't acknowledge that this is a toxic relationship. So you don't even have the storytelling or depth that could be brought on from that. So at this point, I just kind of see all the changes made to Harley as pointless. Also, guys, I don't really find it interesting to make Harley hate the Joker. Every character in the DC universe hates the Joker. Harley was unique in that for once she didn't. She does not become a better character by becoming a strong, independent icon. She loses her depth, she loses her motivation, she loses a good chunk of what made up her personality, and the Joker loses the only character that actually worked with him as a partner. The only one who could actually get under his skin and push his buttons for a change. But it's not like Harley has gained popularity from leaving the Joker either. DC planned so much content for Harley to be in post-Joker because they thought her mega stardom would continue, but what do we have? Her 2 movies after Suicide Squad bombed. Her comic books have been circling the drain in terms of sales for years now, and they've been consistently appearing on the list of dead titles walking. They can't get a creative team involved that can make that book work. As for the Max Harley Quinn show, we really don't have any idea how many people watch that because Max doesn't release any of the numbers, which is actually a sign that it does not get that much viewership because Max only releases the numbers for the shows that are performing really, really well. I don't think Harley will be massively successful again until DC allows her to have a human element that gives people real reason to invest in her. And that probably won't happen until they allow her relationship with the Joker to be explored again. Will they do it? Well, there's a Joker movie with Harley involved coming next year starring Joaquin Phoenix and Lady Gaga. While I'm hoping that that movie finally brings depth back to Harley, I'm still afraid that this is going to be another case of people misunderstanding the character. How are they going to handle the Harley and Joker relationship? I don't know. I want to hope for the best, but I'm not really sure. But I wanted to give my 2 cents on why DC Comics was actually wrong to make that decision to break up Harley and Joker in the first place. And that's all I got for you today. Are you mad at me? Please leave a comment in the comments section telling me how mad at me you are. Or you could subscribe to the channel and ring the bell for notifications to watch more great content. And if you like all of my content, as always, you can support me on Patreon. Costs only $5 to sign up, as Patreon Jay has already done. If you sign up, you will always be shouted out on this channel, and you will get exclusive behind-the-scenes content. And as a special final shout out, my short film The Purple Hand is almost finished. Should be releasing here with the next couple of weeks, so subscribe for that. That's all I got for you today, and I will see you guys next time.